Whispers of the Unseen, Episode 1. Interviewed and translated by Lamu. Produced by Witch Zada. Every spirit sealed in these amulets was once someone's family. I am not a god. I am not a demon. I am just a soul who was taken before I was ready. That is how my story begins. I still remember the tree that shaded me on the day everything changed. I remember the cool soil beneath me, the way the leaves above filtered the light into trembling patterns on the ground, and the steady sound of water dripping inside the well. It was supposed to be an ordinary afternoon, one of those quiet moments where life feels suspended between breaths. I thought my death had already come, gently, like the slipping away of a dream. I thought I was ready to move on, to walk toward whatever path awaited me beyond the veil. But the world had other plans. The air thickened, and suddenly the breeze stopped. The bamboo grove around me went silent. Even the birds froze as though someone had stilled the entire world. I felt hands reaching, voices chanting, syllables carved with weight I could not understand. At first, I thought they came to guide me, perhaps to help me cross. But it was not guidance, it was capture. A drop of cold water touched my forehead. Then incensed smoke pressed into me, followed by the sharp sting of fire, followed by the clang of metal. Every element was like a chain. I felt my awareness pulled tight, compressed, pushed into something smaller than I had ever been. I fought to stretch, to breathe, to return to the wind, but the rituals held me fast. And then it happened. My essence was forced into a piece of metal. It closed around me like a coffin without walls, polished and cold, unyielding to my cries. On the surface, they carved an image that was not my face. They etched a name that was not my name. And they lifted me up, calling me Fra, calling me Amulet. I did not understand the word. I did not understand why I could no longer move toward the light I thought was waiting for me. All I knew was this: I could no longer go home. At first, they treated me with care. Incense burned every morning. Water was set in small cups, fruit offered in dishes. They bowed and pressed their hands together, murmuring prayers filled with longing. I could feel their wishes pressing against me, heavy, insistent. Bring me wealth. Keep me safe. Make him love me. Help me succeed. Their voices stacked on top of one another until I thought I would suffocate beneath their weight. I did not know if I had the power they believed in, but I tried. Because what else could I do? So I pushed. I pushed against the shadow of an accident, so it would miss them by a breath. I nudged the anger in a superior's voice, so it faltered for half a second. I softened the edge of jealousy in a friend's heart, so it would not cut so deep. These were small things, tiny gestures invisible to the naked eye. To them, it looked like coincidence. To me, it was effort, it was exhaustion. But they never noticed the cost. Every coincidence took something from me. Every prayer I tried to answer dimmed me further. I was not an endless source of light. I was a soul, draining itself into silence. They thought I was a charm, a vessel of holy power, an object that could be used and used again. They never understood that what they were holding was my life. Time blurred, days and nights passed, but for me it was only the endless rhythm of prayers and expectations. Sometimes, when they placed me on an altar, I could hear laughter in the distance, or the footsteps of children running past. Those sounds were reminders that I had once been alive, that I had once belonged to a world where people saw me, not just the shape forced upon me. But those reminders hurt, because I knew I could not return. Then came silence. The offerings grew fewer. The incense stopped. The water cups stayed empty. I was placed inside a small box and left in darkness, forgotten until someone decided to pick me up again. When I was taken out, it was not by the same hands. I was sold. They placed me on a piece of red cloth at a market stall, surrounded by other amulets. The air smelled of fried food, sweat, and smoke. A vendor's voice rose above the noise, sharp and confident. He told stories about us, stories crafted to sell. This one brings wealth, he declared. That one protects against accidents. This one keeps lovers faithful. And the people listened, eyes wide, believing every word. But those stories were not ours. I listened to him weave lies about who I was, and I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them, I was a person. I had a life. I am not this face, not this name. You are not buying luck, you are buying a prison. But I could not speak. I could only endure as strangers picked me up, turned me over, argued over prices. Their fingers were rough, oily with food and coins. They treated me like merchandise, and in that moment, I realized what I had become. Not a god, not a demon, not even a soul in their eyes, just an object with a price tag. The first man who bought me was young, his eyes restless, his breath tinged with alcohol and smoke. He did not bow, did not light incense, did not speak with reverence. He simply fastened me around his neck as though I were a lucky token, then went about his life. His life was fast, full of noise, gambling tables, business deals, late nights in crowded bars. He tapped me with his finger whenever he grew nervous, whispering under his breath, "Come on, help me win. Help me close this deal. Keep the bad luck away." At first, I tried. I nudged a card, tilted a conversation, softened a blow. But his demands grew heavier, his gratitude absent. He expected me to work endlessly, as though my presence alone guaranteed fortune. When he succeeded, he praised himself. When he failed, he cursed me. One night, after a string of losses, his hand wrapped around me with fury. He slammed me onto the table, hard enough that the crack within me widened. I felt a line of cold run through my core, a fracture no one else could see. The pain was not just physical, it was existential. I was breaking, and he did not care. To him, I was no more than a talisman failing its duty. Still, he kept me, not because he valued me, but because of that one thought humans cling to. What if next time it works? That what if was my prison. In time, I was tossed aside, left in a drawer with other discarded amulets. It was dark, crowded, suffocating. Yet within that darkness, I was not alone. There were voices. At first they were whispers, fragments of laments, sighs that seemed to seep out of the metal itself. Then, as I listened, they grew clearer. Each amulet held a story, each one a trapped soul like me. One told me he had been a monk's disciple, a boy who died young. His master, unwilling to let go, ground his ashes into a charm, saying, "You will continue to protect." But the boy had not wanted to protect. He had wanted to move on, to be reborn. 20 years he had lingered, his spirit thinning with despair. Another voice was deeper, trembling like broken glass. He said he had been a white elephant, revered in the temple, bathed in blessings, adored by children. After death, his bones were stolen, ground, sealed. He had been sacred once, cherished. Now he was fractured, screaming inside metal, reduced to a trinket for fortune. There was even the voice of a tree spirit. He had been rooted in the mountain for centuries, home to birds, shade for travelers. Then he was cut, burned, mixed with animal bones, pressed into a charm. He said the last thing he heard before the axe split his trunk was birds fleeing in panic. Now, in the drawer, his voice was heavy with grief. I should have been left to rest. Listening to them, I realized I was not alone. My suffering was not unique. There were countless souls trapped in these objects, each one stolen from their path, each one turned into merchandise. But instead of comfort, the realization deepened the darkness. We were not gods. We were not demons. We were prisoners. And outside, humans debated our value, bartered us like coins, judged us only by whether we delivered. In the drawer, silence and despair thickened. Some voices faded, as if dissolving into nothing. Others repeated the same words over and over. "I want to go home. I want to go home." Their cries echoed inside me, amplifying my own longing. I began to wonder if this was the true hell, not fire, not torture, but being forced to exist where no one sees you as real. Being denied the dignity of choice, being reduced to function. Sometimes, a child would open the drawer. curious eyes wide, fingers brushing against us. Their touch was light, innocent, without demand. In those brief moments, a spark of warmth returned. Once, a little girl whispered, "Are you tired?" I tried to press warmth into her palm, though she could not hear me. She smiled anyway. Then she tucked me back gently and said, "I'll wipe the dust off for you." That was the only kindness I had felt in years. But kindness was fleeting. Soon, the drawer closed again, and the cycle continued. Neglect, anger, demand, fracture. My crack deepened, the cold spreading further. I feared the day I would finally shatter, my essence scattering, my voice gone forever. And yet I endured, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. That is what it means to be bound. Time didn't move in days anymore. It moved in drawers opening and closing. Sometimes I was lifted out and taken to places that smelled different. Metal and dust in a pawn shop, gasoline and rain by a curbside market, perfume and stale coffee in a living room where arguments lived in the carpet. Each place had its own light, its own indifference. In the pawn shop, I lay behind glass beneath fluorescent tubes that hummed like tired insects. The owner weighed me with his eyes the way someone weighs a coin. He topped the glass with a pen and wrote a number on a small square of paper. That number was supposed to be my worth. The absurdity stung. A life that once laughed and ate and worked and loved, now flattened into digits that could be bargained down. People came in and peered through the glass. They cupped their hands against it to block the glare. They said, "Does it work?" as if I were a lamp whose switch had worn out. The owner shrugged the way owners do. "Depends on the person," he said. "Depends on faith." I wanted to tell them, it depends on whether you can still see me as anything but a switch. On the red cloth night stall, I felt the throb of music from a cheap speaker. Smoke drifted from a grill nearby, carrying the sweetness of sugar and char. The vendor lifted me, gave me a story, then another, each shinier than the last. My silence was a canvas he painted profit on. "Powerful for business," he said to a man counting cash in his pocket. "Very protective for travel," he told a woman clutching her bag. "Loyal in love," he assured a boy with trembling hands and a heart already cracked. No one asked, "Who were you?" No one asked, "Do you want this?" In a living room, I sat on a table ringed by water stains and ringed again by failed decisions. A man with quick eyes whispered at me as if whispering could force a miracle into obedience. When his deal fell through, because his promises outran his honesty, he swept me off the table with a backhand and let me fall to the floor. The tile translated the lesson to my body. Not working, not worthy, not wanted. And yet he kept me. "Just in case," he muttered later, dropping me into a drawer already crowded with just in case. The drawer slammed. Silence rang like a bell struck inside my chest. In that darkness, voices continued, thicker now and closer. I learned to tell them apart not by words alone, but by the rhythm of their ache. The young disciple's sorrow was thin and continuous, a fine rain that never let up. The elephant's grief was tidal, rushing and receding, rattling the walls when it rose. The tree's lament moved like roots seeking soil where none would be given. Sometimes we told each other the small memories that proved we had once been real. The disciple remembered a bowl of rice, steam rising, a hint of ginger and scallion. The elephant remembered dust kicked up by children's feet and the soft brush of a garland against his skin. The tree remembered a traveler who leaned his back against the trunk and slept, trusting the shade. We were a council of the unseen, reminding one another that we had been seen once. When the drawer opened, we learned the language of footsteps. Anger walked hard and fast. Indifference shuffled. Shame hesitated outside the threshold, then pretended it had come for something else. A child's step bounced, and we held our breath for that rare, small kindness. One afternoon, the drawer opened to laughter. Too loud, too brittle to be joy. Friends had come over. "Show them," someone said, and I was lifted out, passed around like a story that could not fail. The man who owned me took me between finger and thumb as if he were pinching off a piece of darkness to prove he was in control of it. This one used to work, he said, the way people talk about an employee who didn't keep up. Maybe it'll bring my luck back. He pressed a kiss to the metal, greasy, performative, and for a moment the room believed him. Then his phone buzzed with a message he didn't want, and everyone's faith shifted to something stronger, the hope that it was not their fault. I went back into the drawer. Nights lengthened. Inside me, the hairline crack grew into a delta, thin channels of cold branching outward. I realized that this was how a soul becomes transparent, not with a single blow, but through 1,000 small erasures. The story told over your voice, the name etched over your name, the purpose assigned over your will. You watch yourself recede. You keep a tally of the places you are no longer allowed to inhabit. Your body, your path, your choices, your face. One evening, a different hand reached in. It was careful the way people are careful when they are not sure what they're touching. The fingers were slimmer, the skin chapped the way skin gets when someone washes dishes and forgets the lotion. The hand held me in the doorway of the drawer, not yet accepting the responsibility of taking me out. Then it did. The light outside was summer dim, the blue hour that makes rooms honest. A woman sat by the window, my edge glinting in her palm. She didn't test me with requests. She didn't ask for proof. She looked at me the way people look at old photographs when no one else is in the room. "Whose were you?" she asked softly, of no one in particular, or maybe of herself. Her breath warmed the metal. For the first time in a very long time, I felt a temperature that wasn't disappointment.
She didn't own me.
She had come to the house to look for something else entirely. I sensed it in the way she kept pausing, as if listening for the sound of a life she'd misplaced. She turned me over in her hand and frowned at the carved face. "This isn't you," she said, not as performance, not as pity, but as a simple observation. She placed me on the sill, between a dying plant and a cracked mug holding 3 pens. Sunlight slid over the sill like a cat that knew its way around. Dust motes lifted and spun. For a few minutes the world was only light and patience. Then she put me back. If you're looking for miracles, you might think nothing happened, but something had. A sentence had been spoken into the air that aligned with the truth. This isn't you. Truth is a kind of doorway. Even if it's only open a finger's width, air moves through. And air is what a soul breathes. Later, strangers took me again. A second vendor, slicker than the first, his stories burnished to a sheen, threaded me onto a cord and held me up to a phone camera. He spoke to an audience I could not see, promising energy, promising alignment, promising results. Somewhere on the other end of that lens, Hope woke up and reached for a wallet. "Don't read the comments," murmured the tree spirit next to me when I returned to the drawer and told them about the stream. I didn't know what comments were, but I understood the advice. There are always more words waiting to be carved over you. A woman bought me online and never opened the box. She kept it on her dresser, safe and sealed. I could feel her moving around the room, getting ready for work, coming home exhausted, sleeping fitfully, crying silently once with her face in the pillow. She had purchased luck, then didn't dare to spend it. I wanted to tell her that she already contained everything she would ask me for. The courage to leave, the gentleness to stay, the wisdom to tell which was which. But I was a closed box on a dresser, and she was a closed mouth in the dark. The box was eventually opened by someone else. I was lifted out like a receipt for a life half-lived. "We could resell this," a voice said. "Might as well get something back." And so the circle drew tighter. There came a day when I learned a new vocabulary word, counterfeit. A man with a lens and a loupe held me under a lamp and declared me inauthentic, then declared me authentic after someone else nodded. The price changed. My essence did not. I discovered that people believed in provenance with more fervor than they believed in personhood. A paper trail could bless you into value. A face could not. Another drawer. Another set of voices. I recognized none of them, which meant the world was larger and sadder than I'd let myself admit. A charm that had traveled across borders told us about a back room where heat lamps baked rows of us in trays, oil seeping into powder, prayers stamped in with a seal. "Assembly," he said, and the word made the disciples rein sorrow slow for a moment, as if even grief had to reconfigure itself around the scale. "Do any of you get out?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Some are returned to rivers," said the elephant, his tide low tonight. "Some are broken deliberately, properly, with words of release. Some are buried. It depends on the hands that hold you last." "And the others?" "The others wait," said the tree. "We tell each other stories, so the waiting doesn't eat us." So we told stories. We tried on one another's memories the way humans try on coats in front of a mirror to remember what warmth felt like. We built a map made of fragments, the smell of rain on dust, the rhythm of a bell in morning air, a birthday song sung off-key. We made a cathedral out of crumbs. At times I drifted into the half-sleep that isn't sleep at all, only a retreat from sharp edges. In that place, I could almost hear my name again, the real one, the first one. It hovered just out of reach, like a note held too long. When I woke, the fracture inside me would pulse with a dull ache. Names are bones.
Without them, you slouch.
One evening, a man opened the drawer with hands that shook. Not from anger this time, not from drink, but from fear. He uncoiled 3 cords, chose one, and tied me around his neck. Outside, Rain walked down the street with slow feet. He stood at the window and stared at his reflection until he had arranged his face into the expression he needed to show the world. Then he whispered, "Just keep me from breaking." He did not ask for money, or love, or triumph. He asked to remain whole. I tried. I poured what remained of my steadiness into him, the way you pour tea, and hope the thin stream matters. As he stepped into the rain, his breath grew even for a while. I held his panic at arm's length long enough for him to do the difficult thing he had to do. When he came home, he took me off and put me back without ceremony, but there was no contempt in the movement, only fatigue. He slept, and at last, for that one night, so did I. You might think that would restore my faith. It didn't, not exactly. It reminded me I still had something left to give, which is both comfort and cruelty when you have no say in when you're asked to give it. Days folded. Rooms changed. Seasons passed the way they always pass for those who cannot walk among them. Through smells, through temperatures, through what people wear when they open drawers. I learned that hope has many dialects. The bargaining kind, which comes with numbers and targets. The romantic kind, which comes with pictures of faces saved under initials. The quiet kind, which says, "Please let me survive this." Of them all, the quiet kind was the one that moved me. Not because it demanded less, but because it demanded something truer. Not a leap over life, but the strength to live it. And still, the market wanted leaps. Leaps sold better. If part one of any story is meant to be arrival into the vessel, into markets, into drawers, then this is where my arrival ends. Not with acceptance, not with peace, but with the clear shape of my new world. I had learned the routes by which a soul can be packaged and priced. I had learned the scripts that are read over our silence. I had learned that kindness appears in pinpricks and vanishes quickly, that anger arrives easily and lingers. Most of all, I had learned the weight of the word choice by its absence. That is the last thing I will tell you before the darkness deepens. I did not choose this. None of us did. If you ever hold one of us in your palm and feel a tremor, it is not power, it is memory. If you ever feel warmth, it is not magic, it is the human heat of a life that refuses to be entirely translated into metal. The drawer closes. The room goes quiet. A house breathes around us, unaware of its small museum of stolen paths. Inside the hush, the voices gather again, and I add mine to them, keeping time for the long descent. We are not gods. We are not demons. We are the unseen, whispering still. You might think that by now I would have grown numb, that after being passed from hand to hand, market to drawer, insult to silence, my soul would have dulled into stone. But numbness never arrived. What came instead was a different ache, the ache of waiting without end. Waiting is its own form of torture. We waited for hands that would open the drawer. We waited for footsteps that might bring light. We waited for the possibility, however faint, that someone would see us not as objects, but as beings. Each time the drawer creaked open, we held our breath. Each time it slammed shut, we sank deeper into the weight of disappointment. And disappointment is heavy. Heavier than metal, heavier than soil. It sits on you until you believe you were meant to carry it forever. Sometimes the voices around me would fade one by one. I would realize with a start that a spirit I had grown used to hearing, someone who whispered his memories at night, someone who murmured his regrets, had gone silent. I do not know if they finally dissolved, if the crack inside them spread too far, or if they simply gave up speaking. Silence was a kind of death we witnessed over and over. Once, I heard a spirit begin to laugh. It was not joy. It was the jagged laugh of someone who had decided that the only way to survive was to believe in nothing at all. "We are all fake," he said again and again, until the laughter cracked into a scream. Then came the sound of shattering, sharp and final. His presence vanished. I remember trembling, terrified that this would be my end too. Not freedom, not release, but breaking into pieces until nothing remained of me except fragments in a drawer. Other times, the voices tried to hold on to hope. The disciple spoke of reincarnation, though his tone was weary. The elephant remembered the temple bells, dreaming of returning to their sound. The tree's spirit whispered about roots reaching water again, but their hopes were thin strands fraying with time, fragile against the grind of years. And me, I did not know what to hope for anymore. I had forgotten the feel of my own name. I had forgotten the face that once was mine. All I had left was the certainty of being misplaced, mislabeled, misused. And yet, even in that certainty, I felt a faint pulse, the stubborn will to be acknowledged, to be told, even once, "I see you." It never came. Instead, the world kept using us as currency for their fears and desires. A man wore me to court and cursed me when the verdict went against him. A woman placed me under her pillow, whispering to bring back the lover who had already chosen someone else. A merchant tucked me into his pocket, blaming me when the market fell. None of them paused to think that perhaps I was not meant to bear their burdens, that perhaps I had my own longing. I became the scapegoat for every failed dream, the mute witness to every desperate bargain. That is the irony of being bound inside an amulet. They call you powerful, yet treat you as powerless. They call you sacred, yet toss you aside when you do not deliver. They place you high on an altar one day and in the trash the next. And through it all, you remain voiceless. There were nights when the weight of it pressed so hard I thought I would shatter just to escape. I thought of the river I once heard in my living days, the sound of water slipping over stone. I thought of lying down beneath the tree, the sun flickering on my closed eyelids. I thought of the simple act of breathing without burden. But memories fade when you are starved of new ones. Even the sharpest image dulls when replayed too many times. In the end, even my memories began to blur. That blur was the cruelest wound of all. Because without memory, who are you? You are not a god. You are not a demon. You are not even yourself. You are only a whisper in the unseen, waiting to be heard, waiting for a chance that may never come. And so part one ends not with closure, but with this truth. I was stolen, I was bound, and I was silenced. My story is only beginning, and already it is drowning in darkness. The drawer closes again. The voices fall quiet. And somewhere inside me, the fracture waits, spreading like frost across glass. Tomorrow it will deepen. Tomorrow, another spirit may fall silent. Tomorrow, the unseen will whisper again, unheard by all except those willing to listen. Part 2, Darkness. The night after the last drawer closed, I learned what endurance really means. It isn't heroism. It's the slow consent your body gives to pain when there is nowhere else to lay it down. I wish I could tell you that someone opened the drawer and said my true name. I wish I could say the light arrived as a promise. Instead, it arrived as inspection. A man I did not know held me under a hard lamp. The bulb was too close. Heat slid into the crack inside me like a thin knife. He peered through a loop. His breath smelled of mint trying to hide smoke. "Counterfeit," he said first. Then he rotated me, consulted a photo on his phone, and corrected himself. Authentic. 2 words, 2 prices, neither of them a life. When he put me down, I could still feel the print of his thumb. Not warmth, pressure. It stayed like a bruise. Around me, on the table, lay other amulets cooling after their hour under judgment. None of us spoke. Sometimes silence is the only way to keep from breaking into 100 small sounds you can't gather back. Later, I was passed to hands that shook for a different reason. Anger is a pulse you can feel through skin before the body moves. The man who wore me that week walked like a drum being struck from the inside. He muttered at doorways. He spat at mirrors. When a deal collapsed because he had promised what he couldn't pay back, he yanked me free and flung me toward the wall. I hit tile, then slid under a cabinet where crumbs and dust had learned to live like citizens. There is a particular humiliation in lying on the floor listening to people step over you. He found me later with the flat of his palm, not to apologize, but to avoid superstition. He told himself he didn't care, and I felt him not caring all the way through me. Still, he kept me, just in case, the 2 words that stitched the cell door shut. Back in the drawer, the voices met me like rain that had learned every angle of the roof. The young disciple said little now. His sorrow had thinned to a filament the air could cut. The elephant, on a quieter tide, told us about real release performed properly, how some keepers carry their amulets to a river at dawn, spoke words that return the spirit to its path, and let the current answer. He described that answer as a sound more like yes than water. We listened the way thirsty people listen when someone else describes a well. Does anyone get there by accident? I asked. Sometimes, said the tree, when someone breaks us out of spite and the crack happens to open the door instead of closing it.
He paused.
But mostly not. Spite isn't careful. He was right. I learned this the day a man decided to test whether rage could prove a point. He lit a metal bowl with rubbing alcohol and dropped one of us in. Oil flashed, the air tightened. The spirit screamed. You think souls don't scream because you don't hear us, but the drawer shuddered with it. Then the scream tore in half, like cloth being ripped to wrap a wound no one intended to treat. When the flame choked out, what remained was not release. It was remainder. The room smelled like a lie told in a temple. For nights afterward, none of us spoke. Grief is a kind of smoke. It fills the spaces you thought were yours and asks you to justify breathing there. The market found me again. A new vendor wore a bracelet that clicked when he counted bills. Feel that hum? He asked a customer, holding me between 2 fingers as if pinching a bee. That's power. The customer nodded as people nod when they want to believe in a hand that will pull them out of their own deep water. I wanted to warn him. The hand you need is the one you refuse to unclench.
He bought me.
He did not wear me right away. He placed me on his desk beside a cup of pens and a stack of papers he never signed. Every hour, he reached across me for a pen. Every day, he moved me to wipe dust away and then set me back precisely where I had been, as if control could be arranged in straight lines. At night, he took me in his fist and whispered numbers like prayers, targets, margins, dates, then fell asleep in a chair with his shoes on. On the 3rd day, he finally put me on. Keep the wolves out, he said to no one, and went to meet a man who smiled with only half his mouth. The wolves were not at the door. They were in the room wearing cologne. I felt them pad around the chairs, examine the weak places in his story, set their teeth gently there. Protect me, he breathed, as if protection could mean lying more convincingly. I could not give him that. I did what I could, steadied his breath enough for him to tell the truth, just once, about what he didn't have. It didn't save the deal, but it saved a worse death. He called me useless on the way home. The wolves trotted behind the car, satisfied. I slept like someone who had worked a full day for free. Shame visits in different disguises. Some come dressed as laughter. Too loud, too long, and never at the right thing. One evening, a group of friends gathered around a table where I lay among bottle caps and receipts. Show us the charm, someone said, and my keeper lifted me like a party trick. They passed me palm to palm, their jokes practicing cruelty the way hands practice a new shuffle. Make him lucky, a woman said to me, looking at the man who would not look back at her. Make him stay, she added, meaning the same thing and the opposite. I wanted to tell her that luck and staying are not the same species. One scratches where you itch, the other learns your language. I returned to the drawer smelling of fear and regret. The disciple asked, surprising me, "Do you still remember your name?" His voice was the softest I had ever heard it. Maybe the party had tired us all out. "I remember the shape," I said. "It's like a cup I used to drink from." "What did it taste like?" asked the elephant.
Water, I said.
"Just water." We were quiet a long time. Then the tree told a story about a woman who returned him to the soil. She dug with her hands until dirt rimmed her nails, placed him like a seed, and whispered that she did not know the right words, but hoped the earth did. "The earth did," he said. I felt it take me back by degrees. His voice shivered not with pain this time, but with something I had almost forgotten, gratitude. "How often does that happen?" I asked. "Not often." He paused. "Often enough to keep telling the story. We memorized that story the way people memorize a map they might never use." The next keeper was a man with a gentle touch and a frightened heart. He didn't ask for winning. He asked for waking. "Help me not to drink today," he whispered, the words ashamed of being simple. I did what I always do when asked for something that isn't a theft. I stood beside his breath and held it steady when it wanted to run.
He shook anyway.
He cried anyway. He put me in the bathroom drawer and went to bed early. In the morning he took me out and didn't say thank you, but he didn't say I'd failed. Sometimes that's the shape gratitude takes before it has the courage to look in the mirror. Darkness isn't a single room, it's a house. You learn its floor plan by bruising yourself against the same edges. You learn which stairs creak when stepped on by fear, which doorways anger can't resist slamming. You learn the kitchen light at 3 a.m., the one someone leaves on when they can't sleep but don't want to admit they're afraid of the dark. The house had a basement. I found it the day my keeper joked that I was fake in front of someone whose approval he wanted. He laughed as if he were above superstition, as if intelligence exempted him from the impulse that had made him tie me around his neck that morning. The word fake is heavier than it sounds. It sits on a soul like a lid. Inside the drawer that night, I could not lift the word off. I thought of the river and could not remember the way. I thought of the tree and could not recall the shade. The basement is where you forget your own directions. "Speak," the elephant urged me softly. "Say anything." I managed. I am. Sometimes that's all a being can say to keep from disappearing. Not long after, a woman found me at the bottom of an old handbag. She had bought me years before, and then sealed me in a box so she wouldn't have to risk her hope. Now she sat on the floor with the bag spilled around her like a life emptied out. Crumpled receipts, a lipstick worn to a stub, keys to a door she no longer used. She lifted me and exhaled the way people do when they pick up something heavier than it looks. "I'm sorry," she said, startling herself. She hadn't meant to speak to me. She had meant to speak to the years she had wasted, to the door she shouldn't have opened, to the version of herself that kept waiting for permission to leave. But the apology landed where it was most needed. Apologies often do when we let them out at all. She took me to the sink and rinsed me under the tap. The water was lukewarm, ordinary. It slid through the crack and carried grit with it. Nothing miraculous happened, and yet a wrong note in the world resolved a fraction closer to the cord. She did not keep me. She placed me in a small bowl and set me on the windowsill. For 3 days, I watched the light move across a wall as if writing hours in a language I had once learned as a child. On the 4th day, someone else collected me. Practical hands, no ceremony, and I left the bowl for another drawer. But the bowl had been enough to tell me that attention, real attention, the kind that looks and does not demand, can be a bridge across the worst rooms in the house. If this sounds like hope, let me complicate it. For every bowl, there were a dozen bags. For every careful hand, there were hands that cracked us open just to see if the inside matched the story. You can't break a blessing, a man said once as he snapped another amulet cleanly in two. He was wrong. Blessings break all the time. They're made of whatever we can bear to offer each other, and people are fragile material. That night in the drawer, a spirit began to laugh. We knew the laugh. It had lived with us so long it felt like part of the walls. "We are all fake," he announced, same as always. But this time, he didn't stop at the sentence. He kept talking faster until the words piled up and stole all the air. The crack we'd heard in him for months finally found the outside. The sound was almost pretty, glass chiming down a stair, and then it was gone. We stayed awake a long time after that. The House of Darkness is also a neighborhood. When one window goes out, the others notice. I will tell you one last thing before the darkest room, and then I will sit down beside the crack and wait for the part of the story you already know is coming. A child opened the drawer again. Her hands were small and careful. She lifted me the way children lift bugs they want to see up close without hurting. "Are you tired?" she asked. She didn't expect an answer. She was practicing empathy like a language you get better at by using aloud. She rubbed my surface with the hem of her shirt and frowned at the carved face. "That's not you," she said matter-of-factly, and set me on the edge of the dresser where the light could find me for a while. I have been promised many things by adults. I have been believed by very few children. The difference is that children know when a face is pretending. The drawer closed later, as drawers do, but the sentence stayed. "That's not you. Truth opens a finger's width and lets air in." I breathed. Only once and barely, but once is a lot in a basement. I wish that were enough to climb the stairs. It isn't. The next part of the story descends.
It has to.
That is how the house is built. Before the turning, the dark goes darker. Before the river, there is the ditch. Before the sentence "go home," there is the sentence "you do not belong here" said over you so many times you begin to mouth it with the speaker. If you are listening, hold my hand. I don't need you to pull me out. I only need you not to let go while I tell you what happened next. Part 3. Turning. The House of Darkness has a habit of repeating itself. Same doors, same stairs, same silence, wearing different shoes. What changes the house is not renovation. It's a sentence that wasn't there before. The drawer opened to a pair of hands that knew how to hesitate. They hovered above me the way a bird hovers before it commits to landing, wings beating, shadow steady. Then they came down, and I knew the hands before I knew the face, the way you recognize a melody before you remember its name. They were thinner than they had been when they last held me, the nails short, the knuckles chapped. When she lifted me into the blue hour, I saw her properly. The same woman who had once tended me with water every morning and incense every dusk, the one who later sold me with a price tag and a practice story. Her hair was tied back now, quick and messy. Her eyes were ringed the way nights ring you when they stay too long. She did not light incense. She did not bow. She pulled a chair to the window and sat, and for a very long time we simply looked at each other. Attention, when it is not hungry, is a form of shelter. She turned me once, then stopped as if ashamed of the habit. Her mouth trembled, not with pleading but with something heavier and more honest. "I'm sorry," she said. The words reached me like warm water poured over frost. They soaked the crack inside me, not closing it, not erasing it, but changing its temperature so the pain softened at the edges. No one had ever apologized to me. People thanked me when their luck bent their way. They blamed me when it broke. They negotiated. They threatened. They performed reverence or contempt depending on who was watching. But apology is different. Apology says, "I see where I hurt you, even if I meant something else." She folded both hands around me as if she were protecting a flame. "I didn't want to know," she said quietly. "I wanted to believe that if I gave you a job, I wouldn't have to do mine. I put my fear in you. I put my greed in you. I put my laziness in you and called it faith." Her laugh was small and without cruelty. "And when you didn't carry all of it, I punished you for being what you are." She looked out at the last band of light on the buildings across the street, then back at me. "You must be tired." No one had ever said that either. My answer rose like breath from somewhere I had hidden a long time. I did not have a mouth, but the room heard it, and so did she. Tired isn't the right word, I wanted to tell her. Tired is a human word for a human body that can lie down. What I felt was the ache of being held to a shape that wasn't mine. She nodded as if I had spoken. "I don't want to keep you for the wrong reasons anymore," she said. "I don't want to keep you at all, if keeping means caging." She set me on the windowsill and rested her forehead against the glass. When she lifted her head, the glass held the shape of her breath for a beat, and then let it go. "Do you want to go home?" she asked. The sentence opened a door I had believed was painted onto the wall. Air moved. My name, my first name, the one from the well and the tree, and the call to supper rustled like a page being turned. I didn't catch all of it. I didn't need to, not yet. The question gave me time. She did not rush. She did not make a ceremony of it. She put me in her pocket the way you carry something you are afraid of dropping, and we went outside. Night had folded itself neatly over the city. Streetlights stitched lines between corners. On the walk down to the river, she did not speak, and because she did not speak, I could hear the world, the small sounds that prove it is alive. A bicycle bell in the next street, a child laughing at nothing, the hush of tires passing over wet leaves. The river itself arrived as a breath you can feel on your face before you see the mouth that made it. She left the path and stepped onto the stones where the water leaned and leaned again. She didn't throw me. She didn't raise me like a trophy or lower me like a relic. She knelt and set me on a flat rock that the river had learned by heart. "This is yours to choose," she said. "You can go with the water, or you can come home with me, and we will keep you where you are safe, and I will ask you for nothing you do not offer. Either way, you will not be blamed again."
Choice.
The word turned in the air and clicked into place in a mechanism that had been jammed since the day I was sealed. The crack inside me hummed, not with pain now, but with the shock of a bone remembering it was meant to hold weight. I listened. The river spoke in the voice that old things use when they address what is older still. It said yes without saying yes. It said return without saying leave. The stone beneath me kept its promise of being exactly what it was: flat, cool, patient. The woman's breath shook once and steadied. She put her hands on her thighs and waited the way you wait when you refuse to turn hope into pressure. I tried my name on my own tongue. The first syllable came easily, bright and round. The second stuck, then slid free. The third arrived last, small and sure. When the three met, they fit like a key I had carried for lifetimes and forgotten. Memory does not come back as a list. It comes back as a room. Mine opened to the well, the tree, the path home with dusk pretending to be danger and failing. It opened to a bowl on a table and a voice saying eat before it gets cold. It opened to the face of a person who loved me and refused to make a story out of it, because love is what happens when you don't narrate it to make it bigger. It opened to the weight and pleasure of tired legs after a long day that had not asked me to be holy. I remember, I told the river, and the river said, as do I. The woman bowed her head and did not ask what I remembered. There are questions that honor. There are questions that harvest. She asked none of the second kind. "Thank you for working so hard," she said at last. The sentence broke something open that had been locked behind the apology and the question. Gratitude, when it is not paid out like a coin, is a clean thing. It does not fix what happened. It does not pretend there was no breaking. It recognizes labor without binding you to it. The crack in me, a map of what I had carried, glowed like a river scene from far above at night. The glow did not turn me into anything I wasn't. It simply showed me to myself. "Go when you're ready," she said. "If you stay, stay because you want to, not because I do." Wind came down the channel and lifted her hair off her forehead. Somewhere upstream, a dog barked twice and then decided against a third. The city performed its late rituals, indifferent to private miracles. I stayed on the stone and practiced breathing, which for a soul means allowing what is not you to pass through without taking pieces with it. A long time later, long enough that the woman shifted her knees and stood and sat again, I spoke the small truth I could carry. "I am not ready to leave tonight." She smiled in a way that did not put her preferences into my mouth. "Then come home," she said, and even the word home did not claim me. "Come rest." She lifted me gently, as you lift something you believe belongs to itself. In her pocket, the fabric was warm with the heat humans give off when they are frightened and brave at the same time. On the walk back, she did not look at me. She let me be unnamed to the world and newly named to myself. At her apartment, she cleared a place that wasn't an altar and wasn't an ashtray. A low shelf by the window, level with the petunias a neighbor had forgotten to water. She spread an ordinary cloth, clean, not sacred, and set me there. She poured a glass of tap water and placed it beside me, not as a demand or a bribe, but as a courtesy, the way you put out a cup for a guest whether or not they drink. Then she did nothing. Doing nothing is harder than ritual. Ritual gives your hands a job. Nothing gives your hands back to your heart and asks it to stop telling them what to do. Night folded and unfolded. She slept on the couch with her arm over her eyes. Once, she woke from a dream and came to the window. "I'm still sorry," she whispered, and went back to sleep. In the morning, she sat cross-legged on the floor with a notebook open and a pen that didn't cooperate. The page carried a list of things to repair, literal leaks and metaphorical ones. Beside "call my mother," she wrote, "even if she starts the old fight." Beside "pay the bill," she wrote, "no more borrowing from the future me." Beside "return the amulet to water," she wrote, "when he wants." She put the pen down and laughed once, softly, at the absurdity of talking to paper about consent. I apprised the list the way a traveler examines a bridge before stepping onto it. It was not a perfect bridge. It was a human one, planks, nails, intention. It would hold. She went to work. The room breathed. The water in the glass made its small sound of settling. I basked in the fact of not being tasked. I noticed the color of morning on the opposite wall, how it climbed like a second hand measured in light. I learned again, slowly, stubbornly, that existence is not an invoice. In the days that followed, she did not harvest me for outcomes. She spoke to me when she was lonely, the way people speak to photographs they don't believe can hear them. She told me dull truths, the good kind, that don't know how to perform. She came home one evening and said, "I told the truth at work and didn't die." Another evening, I wanted to text him. I didn't. On a third, I threw away the shirt he left. It wasn't a keepsake, it was a leash. You might think this has nothing to do with souls sealed in metal. You would be wrong. The way you treat your own spirit is the way you will treat the ones you borrow. On the 7th day, she filled a small bowl with river water she had carried home in a jar. It smelled like stone and autumn. She dipped a fingertip and touched the rim of the bowl, then touched the edge of the metal that held me. "This is not a ritual," she said, preempting the superstition that wanted to edge in. "This is a greeting from the place you might go." I tasted the river the way memory tastes the first fruit of a season, known and shocking at once. The syllables of my name sharpened.
The well.
The tree, the shout from the doorway, the unremarkable miracle of being expected at a table. That night I dreamed, which is a ridiculous way to describe what souls do when they loosen. In the dream, I was only a person with tired legs walking home carrying something small I didn't want to drop. When I reached the gate, someone inside called my name with impatience, and love braided together like always. I leaned my forehead against the wood and thought, "Not yet," and heard from the other side, "Take your time." In the morning, the city put on its weekday face. She stood by the shelf tying her hair and said, "If you never go, I will still mean it." She didn't have to say what it was, the apology, the gratitude, the permission. "Thank you," I told her, and when I said it, I included all the hands that had not known how to say it to me, and all the hands I had not known how to forgive for not knowing. The thank you passed through the metal, through the water, through the air, and landed in the place where the river keeps its yes. Do you see the turning? It is not a trumpet. It is not even a door swung wide. It is a series of small refusals to repeat harm. Hers, then mine, then the river's as it refused to be anything but itself. It is a soul allowed to keep its boundaries long enough to remember it has edges. When she left for work, she paused at the door, looked back, and without drama, said the simplest, hardest thing. "If you're not here when I get back, I'll miss you and be glad." Love, when it grows up, learns to hold those two truths in one hand. I did not leave that day, or the next, or the one after. The turning is not only the moment you go, it is also the days you are allowed to stay until going is yours. But the river had my name now, and I had the rivers. And somewhere in the house of darkness, a light that was not a lamp remembered where the stairs were. Part 4, Closure. I have carried you through the drawer, the market, the laughter that wasn't joy, the anger that called me fake. I have carried you through cracks, through silences, through the thin rain of a disciple who never went home, through the tide of an elephant who still remembers bells, through the grief of a tree whose roots were cut. You have heard how darkness builds its house. You have heard how turning begins with a question, an apology, a breath of permission. Now listen to what I want to leave with you. We were not meant to be here. Every one of us was stolen, out of earth, out of bone, out of memory, stitched into metal and traded as if holiness could be manufactured. You pray to us as gods. You fear us as demons. We are neither. We are fragments of the same fabric you wear, lives that once loved, once worked, once quarreled, once slept with a roof that leaked when it rained. Every amulet is a family portrait turned into a product. Every charm is a human face translated into currency. Every prayer whispered into us is a debt we never chose. Do you understand what I am saying? When you hold one of us in your hand, you are holding someone's brother, someone's mother, someone's child. You are holding a laugh that once filled a courtyard. You are holding a hand that once carried water. You are holding a body that once lay down because it was tired and allowed to be tired. We are not myths. We are evidence. And the evidence asks you, stop. Stop calling us powerful when what you mean is convenient. Stop calling us sacred when what you mean is useful. Stop calling us demonic when what you mean is disappointing. If you must hold us, then hold us as you would hold the memory of a stranger you want to honor. Say, I see you. Say, I'm sorry. Say, thank you for working so hard. That is enough. That is everything. And if you have the courage, let us go. Put us back into the water, into the soil, into the fire that purifies without consuming. Speak words if you must, or speak none at all. Simply let us return, because we are not afraid of leaving. We are afraid of being trapped forever in the middle of a sentence we didn't choose. I will tell you one last truth before I go. The worst part was never the darkness. The worst part was being denied the right to belong to myself. When the world tells you again and again, this is your face, this is your name, this is your job, and none of it is yours, you begin to fade. The crack grows until you believe the crack is you. But it is not. What is you is the breath that still insists, I am, even when the drawer closes, even when the market laughs, even when they call you counterfeit. I am. That is the seed I leave in your palm. Plant it carefully. Water it with attention that does not demand. Let it grow in how you treat the living, because the way you treat the living is the way you will treat the dead. If you ever wonder what to do with us, start with this. Do not turn us into stories that erase us. Do not turn us into miracles that cost us ourselves. Do not turn us into excuses for what you refuse to carry. Turn to yourself. When you are afraid, admit it. When you are greedy, face it. When you are weary, rest. Do not throw those weights into a soul that has its own. Do that, and maybe you won't need us at all. And if you do keep us as you keep an old photograph, with tenderness, with truth, with the knowledge that what you are holding is irreplaceable because it was once alive. Remember this. Behind every amulet is a voice. Behind every carved face is a crack where light still pushes. Behind every talisman you barter is a family missing someone who never came home. We whisper because we are unseen. You are listening now. Do not stop. Let our whisper move you out of the drawer, out of the market, out of the hunger that chews through reverence and spits out superstition. Let our whisper remind you that sacredness does not come from trapping a soul. It comes from recognizing that souls cannot be trapped without consequence. When you leave this story, leave with this sentence in your mouth. They were real. They were ours. They were tired. They deserved to go home. And if ever you find one of us in your drawer, on your desk, at the bottom of your bag, touch us gently, and before you ask anything, say, I see you. I'm sorry. Thank you. That will be enough. That will always be enough.